Okay, moving to our next quadrant, building operations. We'll throw it to Josh again. So Josh, how has improving your building operations influenced your decision to adopt technology?
So I think building operations is probably the most important, quadrant that really comes down to when people are determining what they want to use. It's when you can operate your buildings more efficiently. There's a huge advantage to that, and I really think that that's what's driving most of the industry right now. So I know in our case, we acquired a California portfolio of there's about 50 buildings, but they're all small. There's probably 15 to 20 units in each one of these things. And, we needed something that we could manage without we don't have a lot of people on site. So it definitely allows us to operate those properties on a more dispersed area with less people. And, when you get those operational efficiencies, that's vital to anything that you're doing, whether it's smart home or any other type of technology that you're putting in place. So, that's where we really see the advantage inside of Mission Rock is through operational efficiency for sure.
This is like the low-hanging fruit. This is the ones that make it easy to adopt technology when you can say, hey, I know exactly and can quantify the efficiencies we're supposed to get from this. Other thoughts on how you've seen this take place with either your clients?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So couldn't agree more with Josh's assessment, really, that it is the most important component, and I will definitely resonate that. Both Alliance and BH, they base their decisions based off operational impact. 100,000 unit portfolios definitely can see the benefit at scale of some of these technologies. So I think from you look at electricity cost reduction, the water damage reduction, mold damage reduction, HVAC maintenance expenses, all these things are kind of sunk costs you guys are already planning on spending. So you've got this bucket of money, and essentially you're going to spend it whether or not you want to. So the question is do you want to offset those expenditures leveraging technology, or do you want to continue to increase those expenditures? And with the technology that exists, it really, especially post-pandemic, has been more apparent than ever that being able to manage these things remote is probably one of the most powerful benefits. But in addition to that, being able to lower the money you're putting in that bucket for mishaps or accidents or whatever the case may be, it really does change the owner-operator's perspective in being proactive in their technology adoption approach as opposed to reactive, trying to just solve problems as they're happening. So definitely agree with Josh on that for sure.
I'd even pick up on that proactive, reactive discussion point and go even a step further by saying, can we make it even preventative, right? Absolutely. So, when we sit with property managers, leasing professionals, maintenance professionals, and we start to examine some of the things they're doing on a day-to-day basis and saying, well, what if the technology did this? Because let's be honest, like you start with technology, even that word sometimes on site is like, uh-oh. And we have to take the uh-ohs to make things seamless. And when it's, hey, if you were to get a notification when there's an event, a water event we'll call it, because that's usually the most disastrous and costly, right? And we can solve for that by getting you out there, getting you in the door before there's a big problem and an expensive problem. Now you save that maintenance professional. Okay, I've got to get on with shop vac, and I've got to get underneath the carpet, and all the things that come with that. I won't go into the A through Z on that one, but it's a nightmare, and it's an expensive one. So then you start to see maintenance say, because usually it's, what are you putting on my walls? I don't know about that thermostat. I need to know everything, So, you start to do that and say, wow, that makes my life a lot easier. The property staff starts thinking, wow, so we don't have to deal with that again. I don't have somebody screaming at me because maybe the thermostat was left on upstairs and pipes blew and we had this mess. So when we start to paint the picture, like the actual day-to-day application of this technology, that it's not something that we should fear. That wave shouldn't be big and come crashing down on someone's day-to-day. It actually makes their lives a lot easier. And asset owners say, oh my gosh, like if we can help our staff do that with technology that my residents want and that's good for my building and it makes lives easy for my staff, again, I'd end with like, why not? This is becoming a no-brainer.
Yeah, the thing that I'll add to that is all of the clients that we've talked to, whether they're existing ADT multifamily clients, whether they're competitors' clients, anyone who's adopted the technology already, none of them are saying, we tried it at a couple of properties and we're going to go backwards. We're not going to use technology at any other properties. It's once you've started going down that hill, the speed picks up. You say, let's add more properties. I think Josh is going to talk about that in a bit as well. But when you're adding technology, I think the whole market penetration right now might be 5%. The folks that we talk to may be unhappy with their provider. They may be unhappy with part of the experience, but from a building operations standpoint, none of them deny that it makes financial sense for them to continue down the smart technology path. So whether the service is there that they're looking for, whether the cost is more than they expected, whether the headaches are there just from an actual service standpoint, the technology itself is saving money, it is mitigating risk, and it is preventative. And so that's the plus side on the building operations piece, I would say.
One of the things that Josh mentioned there was being able to be more efficient with headcount. When you have properties that are maybe in the same region, they're within driving distance of each other, but you don't necessarily have to have manpower at each of those. And when I talked to him and kind of went a little bit further into that discussion, it was not just maintenance people, but it was also leasing people that they were able to kind of spread out. That seems to be able to unlock particular strategies when it comes to, acquiring, building, that where before some of the finances may have made it difficult or maybe not as easy on paper to justify adding some density within a particular region, that now with technology, you're able to do that and have fewer headcount, but still be able to adequately service and maintain and sell into additional properties.
Yep.
All right, next quadrant, platform compatibility. We'll have Josh kick it off again for us. So Josh, can you tell us a bit about how either support of a platform or lack of platform compatibility has driven your technology decisions over recent years?
Well, I think any organization, that's whether it's Mission Rock or anybody else that's an apartment manager, you're going to want a technology that integrates with some of these larger players, the Yardys and the Real Pages and every, other Entradas that are out there. Like whatever property management system you're using, these programs all have to integrate with them. And I think the industry understands that. That's what you see is everybody's, they do work and at least communicate with those applications. So everything is in one, it's in one dashboard, because you want to have 15 dashboards to manage everything. You want to have one place that you go to and you can manage your property, whether you need to reset a lock code or you need to, pay rent or anything like that, or get a maintenance request in. You want it all done through one system. And so, obviously the integration with those major property management systems is vital for any of the any system that we look at that we want to implement.
So that seems to be a recurring theme over the last few years, as we have different technology being introduced into different aspects of the customer experience, of figuring out how do they interact with each other. What are some things you've observed or ways that you've seen your clients make decisions based on the support or lack of platform compatibility?
I'll start. So I think definitely it's not quite as important as operational efficiencies that we previously discussed, but it is, I would say, high on the list for sure. Because really after identifying, okay, we want IoT-based technology, now it's a matter of, okay, well, are we going to use a platform that's going to require an extra step for our on-site team, like we've discussed. So I think good technology, as I understand it, you never recognize is actually there. And the only way to make sure that you don't recognize that technology is there is to make sure that all of your technology plays well together. And I think actually your example of CVS is a prime example in how they've integrated their calling system with several other aspects of their business, where they're able to consolidate a seamless experience very simply. You don't even realize, like you said, right? Like, oh man, should I switch? You know what I mean? Like, this is insane. That is platform compatibility. That is, they chose solutions that talk to one another so they can provide the maximum benefit to their clients. And so really all we're doing is the same thing in multifamily and trying to reduce the amount of apps, trying to get everything within one experience that's unified for that resident, because the retention of keeping a resident if you're having them open more than 2 apps after having lived there for a year. The chances of them renewing decrease exponentially. And now that we have a data set that we can see how big of an impact that makes, it's more important than ever to make sure that you're finding solutions that are already going to play well in your ecosystem instead of adding an additional layer of complexity that is going to drive you insane. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Yeah, excuse me, I'll follow up on that real quick. It's kind of interesting. I think Josh mentioned Yardi, RealPage, and Trada. Obviously, there are big PMSs that we try and integrate with, but I think all of you probably have a separate app, maybe a CRM tool that you're using, maybe a bill pay tool that you're using. If you're not using one of the big PMSs, and the big PMSs don't do every company that they've purchased to make this one app experience, right? They're out there just gobbling up everybody. They didn't necessarily buy the company that does it best or the company that focuses specifically on what this property management company wants to focus on. So this is just a cautionary tale, right? Each of you has a specific software that you want integrated with Smart Home. And just in this room, if there are 60 of you telling ADT, hey, can you integrate with this software? It's not as easy as just, yeah, we can integrate with it, right? There's a lot of work that goes on in the background. We have engineers that we pay year-round to do this kind of stuff. The man hours that go into it are insane. We hire offshore teams. We hire additional teams to try and build this out for us. So when you say we have this one off-brand thing that really works well for our company, but we want a one-app experience, it's not as simple as just making it work with that one. And I'm throwing this out there just to be on the opposite side of the coin here from a supplier standpoint and say, we want compatibility as well. We want a smooth runway to a sale, but when there are, to the buyer, it's, if you can just integrate this one thing, we got a deal. And they say, we have 5,000 units that will do it in. And then somebody else says, if you can do it in this one thing, you got a deal. And we have 6,000 units that you can do it in. And somebody else says, we have this thing, we have 20,000 units. We have to prioritize that as well. So as much as we want the resident experience to be very smooth, very simple, again, not welcome to your new apartment. We don't have keys. We don't have to hand you a key. But if you could go to the App Store and download these 12 apps, you'll really enjoy living here. That's not the experience that we're trying to create.
Right.
Here. So, to the point of platform compatibility, all of us are compatible with the big software companies. It's the niche or smaller companies that you say, this would really make the resident experience better. As a sales guy, I think it is that simple, but then I talk to my engineering team and they say, why do you keep telling people it's simple to do this? I don't know. I think you're just bang away on a computer for a couple minutes and it works, right?
Just create a button.
So I would add to that. I agree with everything that's been said up here. If we look at IoT as a whole, what's happening at a really fast pace is the opportunity for IoT, right? So I think 5-6 years ago, it was the smart unit, right? It was everything behind the door. And then COVID was a bit of an accelerator on self-guided tours. And so we had to, as providers, we had to figure out the intercom. And then it was, well, why wouldn't I just include my access control with my intercom, with my behind the door smart unit? So we went from smart units to smart apartments to smart communities, and now we're talking about smarter portfolios, right? So within all of that, in that discovery process is, well, what systems are you using for access control and intercom and this and this and this, right? So, as providers, ADT, Point Central, and we're powered by Alarm.com, so there's 10 Alarm.com engineers back there. So if I say anything, they'll tackle me on stage. It's outside of what I should say. But the reality is, how do we streamline that to ensure there's table stakes? So, your home-based software, whether that's Yardi or RealPage, that has to be integrated to move units in and out, in an automated fashion. But to do this on a single layer, one pane of glass, so the resident doesn't feel that there's different types of technology sort of interruptions, right? And the staff doesn't feel that. That's how it's done. And so that's, we partner with ADT and there's others obviously that do this. But that's why we would say, look at your provider to make sure that track record of stability and success is there, because if this gets flawed or interrupted, or if a big happens and the provider doesn't know how to solve for that, you've got a problem. You've got a big one, actually, right? So there's that sort of check mark for stability as you evaluate, who to do this with.
I think the interesting thing that Mike just brought up there, if you talk about stability, the companies that you're dealing with, et cetera, this panel, I think, is interesting because 3 years ago, you could have had Latch, Zego, and Vivint up here on stage, and now none of those 3 companies do smart apartments. Well, Latch still does it today, but it's not looking good. So when you think about that, though, no, they've had 30% layoffs 3 times this year.
Oh, you're not wrong.
So,
Oh, man. Oh.
so it's the stability of who you're working with is such an important piece of this as well. It's not who can get me the integrations I'm looking for the fastest. It's who's going to be the partner that I can trust long term. Because as this market changes, there are new competitors entering every day. There are folks who have been in the industry for a long time selling a different product that now think, hey, we should sell smart apartments. And when you watch as people dip their toe into this, you have to think, okay, how long are you planning on doing this? When Vivint pulled the rug on multifamily, still a great company, still a huge company, multi-billion-dollar company, but multifamily just wasn't a play that worked for their business model. And when they pulled that, it left a lot of customers wondering, what do we do now? You know, I thought we chose a company that was going to be stable, that was going to be here for the long haul. And so dig into whoever you're working with, not just for platform compatibility, but for stability. I think that was a great point, Mike.
Absolutely.
How does a potential client make that decision? How do they judge or assess the stability of a company for that type of, if they're a new entrant?
Taylor's been on the decision-making side of this. I think he's probably best to answer that.
That's a great question. So not to totally flog my company right now, but I will tell you that while I was at Alliance and BH, one of the first things that I did as kind of the decision maker over those technologies was I built a kind of an inflow system of how vendors should do business with us and how they should contact us. So that streamlined kind of our communication channel with vendors, which allowed us to assess and verify a significant amount of the benefits and details behind the scenes of a company, such as how are they funded, are they fundraising, what are their goals in the next 5 years, if they're acquired, what's going to happen, all these things. And so why I say flogging innovative NOI is really because we actually only do business with vendors that have passed our verification process. So we put every vendor for our clients' sake through a similar process to that I built for those 2 companies. So we make sure that the companies are going to be around. We know exactly what they're going to do in the future, and we know what their roadmaps are. So we know if the client says, hey, you know, right now we're only going to deploy 5 communities, but we see our 10,000 unit portfolio being 100% smart in the next 10 years. Well, then obviously they want a solution that's going to be around for 10 years. And having been doing this since smart home was really introduced in this industry since in 2016 around that time, I can tell you that I've seen more companies come in and out of business in this niche than, I mean, anything in my entire experience. So it's definitely something you need to be concerned about. It's something you need to take into consideration when you're choosing a vendor, but more so as well, making sure that you know, you're not going to be getting the call in 3 years because you deployed a latch lock that's no longer supported by a company that, you know, went out of business. I mean, obviously, you don't want that headache, and I don't want you to have that headache. So we try to reduce that.
And going back to platform compatibility, what advice do you give for a potential client who is looking to adopt a technology? The vendor is saying, "Oh yes, we are compatible with, you know, whatever your system is." How do you verify that? How do you make sure that it's the right level of compatibility rather than signing the contract and finding out, you know, months into the deployment that there's some gaps?
Absolutely. So the first thing we do is start with the client and their needs. So we understand way before we even have a discussion with any vendors, what exactly are their needs? What does their ecosystem look like? What are the challenges that they're facing and trying to solve with this technology? Because it's not one size fits all when it comes to IoT providers. And if you're not trying to solve a problem that, say, a more expensive vendor would allow you to solve, then why would you go towards that vendor? So it's my job to really make sure that our clients are maximizing their return by minimizing the investment that they have to make in technologies that actually are going to solve their problems, instead of just spending because it's a shiny new toy and they think they need to spend the money.
Gotcha. Any other advice on what you do to help people feel confident that integration is either going to be there or to?
We have no problem opening, you know, our contact book of people who, so they say, hey, I want to make sure this integration really works with Yardi. I'll give them a customer who's a Yardi user and say,
they can go see it,
talk to this user, find out how it's working for them, see what the integration feels like, and then we're constantly pulling feedback from folks. You know, we do work with Point Central, and there are calls with customers who say, I need the software to work this way. And again, everything gets prioritized, right? Where we say, okay, what impact is this going to make on the bottom line if we make this change? But the product is constantly evolving to meet customers' needs, customer demands. As new items surface, hey, we want our smart homes to operate this way, to work this way, to be this resident experience now. We continually look at it, but for anybody out there who's considering this and you say, hey, I need it to work this way, ask for a customer that's already using it that way and talk to them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to our last quadrant, financial analysis and performance. So Josh, can you describe an example that you've had in recent years where prior to making a decision on technology adoption, you had to go through and show financially why it was justified? And if so, tell us a little bit about the process. What tools did you use? How did you reach that final decision?
Yeah, I think, financially, you always have to back up what you're putting in place, right? I mean, you got to show that the ROI is there. Throughout the different projects that I've put in place, I've never actually used a tool that I've had to, put in place except for an Excel spreadsheet and just kind of explaining what's going on with the financials piece. But, if it's whether you're putting in like, campus-wide Wi-Fi that you're going to charge residents for, you just got to, if you're buying it and you're paying $30, we got to make sure that we're going to get 45, for instance, make sure we're going to get at least $15 off of it. So I think that depends on the organization, what they want to see. There's certain percentages they want to see for each project that they put in place. But you also, it's not always about the financial return either. It's about the operational efficiency piece, right? So if you decide you want to roll these technologies out to all of your properties in your portfolio, you've got a large portfolio and you can reduce headcount, for instance. There's a huge financial piece to that. Or if you can manage those properties with less people, it's more beneficial. Or you can also set up, the regions where you can, if you've got, let's say, a bunch of properties in the Seattle area that you can manage with a group of maintenance technicians and even leasing agents, rather than just having people stationed at each property. And this technology allows you to do that, then you can get the ROI from there. So, I think it just depends on the organization and what they're looking for and what they're trying to do with it.
Those were two really the easiest scenarios where you're saying, okay, it's going to cost us this for this feature. We're going to be able to turn around and charge our resident X plus, whatever percent. Or we've been able to identify the operational efficiencies. Those seem like pretty easy solutions that are going to get approved and get the green light. But a lot of technology is not that simple. So how do you try to quantify some of the more intangible benefits? Sometimes we have that gut. We know it's there, but maybe we haven't been keeping track of all those costs or the frequency of those type of events or what's going to happen within the organization to put it on paper and to create that Excel spreadsheet that Josh was talking about. I think everyone here has probably done one of those Excel spreadsheets.
I think Taylor's probably gonna have some good points here when it comes to financial analysis, but one of the things that I'll bring up, I mentioned earlier that ADT's been in the multifamily business since the 80s. It was via acquisition. There was a company called Network Multifamily that was acquired by Protection One, and then Protection One merged with ADT. We still have customers with tradition. It wasn't smart home back in the 80s, right? It was traditional burglar alarms. The attrition rate, even for something as simple as a couple of door contacts and a keypad, is around 1%. So they bought it. They said, we're going to pay $10 a month. We're going to charge $11 a month. And they've kept it for 20 or 30 years in some of these cases because it's still generating revenue for them. They've gotten upgraded along the way. The product, worked on collectors back in the day or traditional phone lines, and we've gone to cellular now. As the technology changes, we call those customers. And even when we're reaching out saying, your technology's outdated, it's time to update it, your costs are going to increase a little bit, the attrition rate still remains below 2% because it's a revenue generating item for them where they say, we are paying less for it than we're charging for it, and our residents have come to expect it at this point. So whether it's something that they put into their marketing materials to say, property A is different than property B across the street, for $10 more, you're getting this experience, it becomes something that you can't back away from. So I talked earlier about 5% penetration for smart home in the market right now, and that's only going to keep going up because once it's implemented, it's something that just generates revenue. So I look at it very simply. I've never operated a property myself, but we're paying X dollars for it, we're making X dollars on it. It's not something that ends up going away. So that's just my 2 cents on it from the supplier side.
Yeah, I agree. I'll date myself here. Not that the gray hair in my beard didn't do that already, but like, who had like the roll-up windows? Like, anybody have the roll-up windows growing up, right? Then you go to power windows and like you just never go back, right? Like it's just too easy, right? So we're definitely at power windows stage here, even though I'd say overall we're in like the third inning, right? We have our tech enthusiasts that started. We're in that early adoption phase, and we're kind of graduating to the big middle in terms of like the adoption curve for this technology. I know Taylor's going to have quite a bit to add, but what I like to do is like really like roll up the sleeves and like kind of get in there with our owner operators and say, okay, yeah, there's rent lift, which that's an interesting conversation. Like we've already entered into that territory now. Is that possible based on the economic environment? Which I like because it can't, that's the easy way out almost, right? Okay, you charge another 50, we're going to charge you 10 here, and you know, you make the rest, right? That's still possible without a doubt, but it's more complicated. So like rolling up the sleeves and saying, okay, you've got 10,000 units in the portfolio. Let's talk about vacant unit costs and what happens there. And if you were to save, 17, 18% on vacant unit costs, let's look at that. So we're working now with our owner operators and saying, well, let's examine like the intangible elements to this and help illustrate that ROI or help, the operations team understand what kind of impact this can have. How many water events did you have last year? What did that cost you? Those are big numbers, right? Okay, if those go to zero, what does that do? So now you start to take those intangible elements, and it becomes like that 1 + 1 = 3 dynamic, where you really see the opportunities for smart home, throughout the community financially, and that's the resident experience and the efficiencies, like those things are absolutely wonderful about this product. But the finish line is this, and this is what pushes this sort of deal over the edge and helps everyone win.
Now I want with my windows, I complain when it's one I have to actually hold it the whole time to roll the windows up, or I just want to do it once and have it do automatically.